Africa's richest man, Aliko Dangote's colossal $20 billion oil refinery was supposed to be a game changer for Nigeria. But the project has become entangled in a fierce, high-stakes dispute involving the NNPC, short for the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation, and international oil companies, over allegations Dangote is trying to monopolize the market for refined products. For decades, Nigeria has been in an absurd position where it pumps oil, sells it abroad, then re-imports it more expensively in refined products. Enter the largest single-train refinery in the world, first conceived a decade ago and completed last year after delays and cost overruns. The plant was supposed to win Nigeria off its dependence on imported refined petroleum products. Producing 650,000 barrels of petroleum a day at full capacity, the refinery is, according to its website, built to meet 100% of the Nigerian domestic demand of all refined products, save scarce foreign exchange, and also have a surplus of each of these products for export. That would make it the largest refinery in Africa, producing a variety of products including gasoline, diesel, jet fuel, and polypropylene. However, little is going according to plan. You see, the sheer size of the Dangote refinery threatens not just Nigeria's refined products importers, but European refinery owners and oil industry. You see, Nigeria currently imports refined products from refineries in the EU, but with the new refinery, that is going to stop.
I thought building a refinery like this is supposed to be a pride for everybody. Because we are not the only country. Angola, they've been trying for 20 years. They are still trying. Uganda, they've been trying for the last 15 years. None of them. There is no production capacity in Africa. Only two countries are not importing, which is, Algeria and Libya. Apart from this, everybody is an importer. We cannot continue to be slaves.
Once at full capacity, the Dangote refinery could append what has been a highly lucrative Europe to Africa fuel trade and transform the country's fortunes. Some say it will put European plants out of business. Some of Europe's largest refineries like Shell and Total Energies are owned by international oil companies, which have for decades had a stranglehold in Nigeria's oil industry. Problems began to surface when the Dangote refinery, which started operations in January of 2023, struggled to acquire enough feedstock of Nigerian crude. The first shipment of 1 million barrels sent in by Shell International Trading and Shipping Company last December was to be followed rapidly by other suppliers to support daily refining of 350,000 barrels a day in the first phase of production. Those supplies' commitments were not honored, adding to its operational challenges. To date, the refinery has been unable to meet its production capacity due to insufficient domestic supplies, which has forced it to import crude from faraway countries, literally an ocean away, like the United States and Brazil. The standoff coincides with a planned withdrawal from Nigeria by the majority of international oil companies, including Total Energies, ExxonMobil, and Eni. All three companies are currently in the process of selling onshore and shallow waters assets to Nigerian players, though most have faced delays, opposition, and even court challenges. The irony is that, despite vandalism, sabotage, and low investments deterring production, Nigeria is still the largest oil producer in Africa. Yet it has not been able to supply the new refinery with crude as expected. Tensions escalated when Dangote's refinery accused international oil companies of obstructing its access to locally produced crude and the Nigerian Midstream and Downstream Petroleum Regulatory Authority of facilitating importation of lower quality fuels. The refinery argued that such practices undermine its operations and the quality of its products. Despite billions of dollars of investment over the years, Nigeria owns 4 underperforming and frequently broken down refineries with a combined capacity of 445,000 barrels daily. Those refineries, 2 in the oil hub of Port Harcourt, 1 in Wari in the Niger Delta, and the other in the northern city of Kaduna, are all operating at less than 50% capacity. That means that petroleum for everyday use must be imported, a scenario which has spawned extremely wealthy fuel importers and diesel traders who benefit from an entrenched system that has contributed to millions languishing in poverty and bled the giant of Africa for decades. So clearly, there's going to be a whole class of local and foreign interests who don't want the new refinery to succeed. Total Energies, which announced a supply deal with Dangote at the Africa CEO Forum in May, shipped only one cargo of Aminam crude to the refinery in April and has not delivered to the refinery since. Another reason for this is that Nigeria has tied up much of its future oil production in oil-backed loans and other swap deals, leaving little or nothing for local refiners, including Dangote. Last year, Nigeria spent about 12 trillion naira or $8 billion on petroleum products imports, or 33% of total imports for the country. So, it came as a shock when this man, Farouk Ahmedi, CEO of the Nigerian Midstream and Downstream Petroleum Regulatory Authority, announced to the nation that fuel imports would continue uninterrupted despite Dangote's refinery coming online, because the government would not allow a monopoly in the sector. He alleged that diesel from Dangote's refineries is inferior compared with overseas imports. Further fanning the flames, Nigerian lawmakers launched an investigation into these allegations. A newly formed committee is now tasked with probing claims of fuel contamination, the operations of regulatory bodies, and the overall state of the oil sector. This situation took a dramatic turn when Dangote invited lawmakers to inspect his refinery, and tests conducted there revealed that the sulfur content in the refinery's diesel was 87.6 parts per million, significantly lower than that of other locally available fuels, which means it's of a much higher quality than anything in the market.
Mafia in oil business, they are worse than the mafia in drugs. Yes, so they are big, because in drugs, you at least have an idea who and who you are fighting. But in oil, you don't know. Yes. Yeah, both internally, externally, even within, yes. And I can tell you, I'm 100% sure, they might even have people inside us.
The billionaire may have ignited the wrath of regulators when he made allegations that some NNPC officials and other interests were running a blending scheme in Malta, where they were illegally importing substandard petrol products into the country. Trademap's latest figures indicate that Nigeria's petroleum imports from Malta surged significantly to 2.8 billion in 2023.
Is the Tinubu government's own vested interest. Bola Tinubu, as you may know, has a nephew, Wale Tinubu, who owns an oil company called Owando. Now, Owando has never at any point been a particularly major player, in the West African or the African oil space. But as soon as Bola Tinubu became president, Owando's share price has gone up to the moon. Owando has somehow taken over AGIP, the local operations of the international oil company known as AGIP, and has overnight basically become Nigeria's largest oil company.
NNPC bosses have denied any linkages to the offshore plant, but the dots seem to be connecting. The regulator argues that the facility, if it exists, does not affect NNPC's business operations and strategic actions. What is telling, though, is that Nigeria's problems with the quality of imported fuel are not new. 2 years ago, the downstream market was grounded for almost 2 weeks after the NNPC, which manages the importation and distribution of fuel, said it had found methanol at levels far higher than allowed. Nothing has been heard of the subsequent investigation ever since. For Dangote, whose business empire was allowed to flourish under previous administrations in return for him investing billions of dollars, the dispute is a shock. To his critics, he's a man who's manipulated the government. He's a monopolist who's rigged the system so that he doesn't have to compete fairly. This impasse would have been unthinkable only a few years ago under former President Muhammadu Buhari, with whom Dangote enjoyed warm relations. A few months ago, agents of Nigeria's independent anti-corruption watchdog, the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, raided the Dangote Group's Lagos office, ostensibly as part of an investigation into alleged mismanagement of foreign exchange allocations by a former central bank chief. Back in 2023, just days before newly elected President Bola Ahmed Tinubu was sworn in, Dangote inaugurated the vast oil refinery to great fanfare. Unexpectedly missing from the attending dignitaries, which included President Buhari and other heads of state, was newly elected President Tinubu. The reasoning behind the fiasco, according to multiple sources, could be that Tinubu and his allies felt that Dangote was not sufficiently supportive during last year's bruising presidential elections. Worth more than $12 billion, Dangote has enjoyed cozy relations with Nigerian leaders. They considered him a champion of domestic industry as the country's largest employer outside the federal government and one of the country's highest taxpayers. However, in Nigeria, it is not unusual for old favorites to suddenly face pressure after a change in the political landscape. Dangote was thought to be different. As the standoff ensues, the country has once again been plunged into shortages, with long fuel queues returning to major cities. Nigeria's 4 public refineries are simply too inefficient to provide any relief. At full capacity, which was previously expected by the end of the year, the Dangote refinery was expected to produce 103 million litres, almost twice Nigeria's current daily consumption from the country's crude, solving the historic problem of fuel shortages and product adulteration. But this lofty dream could be sacrificed to the ongoing self-destructive infighting, underscoring the sway of neo-colonial capitalist overtures and vested interests over common sense and the common good.